Konnichiwa mina, oriwaji mina. If you've ever played Diablo 3 and you found yourself thinking, well gee, this is a great game and all, but if they're going to make me play it online only, it might as well be a free-to-play game, then I have got the perfect Christmas present in store for you. What's that? Today's the 26th. You celebrate Boxing Day, don't you? Path of Exile was developed and published in 2013 by New Zealand-based company Grinding Gear Games. Despite being in business for close to 10 years, Path of Exile appears to be their only game. Unlike the previous two games I covered for No Budget Gaming, you don't have to create an account with an online gaming service like Diablo's Battle.net before playing the game. Instead, with Path of Exile, you sign in using your Steam account. There are 6 classes available for you to choose from at the start of the game, with the 7th class available once you unlock it in Act 3. Now, the Diablo references I've made, and will probably continue to make during this show, aren't for nothing. If you've played any of the Diablo games, you've pretty much played Path of Exile. Everything about the latter, from the look, to the control scheme, to the setup of the game, draws heavy influence from the former. You start the game washed up on the shores of a land called REUPLOAD. You've been exiled to this land as punishment for committing some crime. Just what kind of crime depends on the story of the class you chose. The first thing you'll do is pick up a weapon, which just so happens to be on the ground in front of you. Again, what type of weapon depends on your class, although I feel like they could have dropped just any old weapon here, as it seems like any weapon can be used by any class without too much of a stat penalty that I've noticed. You'll also notice a gem on the ground. More on those later. And a fellow shipmate / prisoner who, after you talk to him, promptly gets killed by an undead. After fighting your way through hordes of undead, a few sand spitters, and your first boss, you'll make it to the first town, and it's here where you'll start noticing other players in the game. To be more accurate, you'll have seen their messages in the chat window by now, but because of the randomly generated maps, you won't actually see other players until you get to a town, presumably unless you're in a party. For equipment, your character has 2 sets of 2 weapon and or shield slots, which you can switch between at will, 1 armor slot each for your head, torso, gloves, waist, and feet, nothing for your legs, strangely enough, and jewelry slots, 1 for an amulet and 2 for rings. Again, although some equipment requires a certain level or a certain amount of a particular stat to use, no equipment in the game, at least as far as I've played, seems to have any class requirements, which means, if you so desire, there's nothing stopping you from having your ranger, a class that starts out with a bow and arrow and is more aligned with dexterity than anything else, lop a zombie's head off with a 2-handed claymore. By the time you get to the first town, thanks to the massive undead you killed, you'll probably have leveled up at least once, which means you can add stat points. Doing so couldn't be simpler. All you do is press the P key or click this button in the menu and holy crap, look at the size of this skill tree! You'll generally get 2 skill points to assign with each level up. Just how your skill tree branches out depends, surprise surprise, on what class you are. 3 of the classes available from the start of the game have affinities with either strength, dexterity, or intelligence, while the other 3 have an affiliation with 2 of those 3 stats. However, just because you're aligned with a particular stat doesn't mean you won't be able to later put points into the other 2. The Scion, the class unlockable in Act 3, is aligned with all 3 stats. Now, before you get too impressed with the skill tree, it should be mentioned that all of these skills, every single one of them, are passives. If you want active abilities, you'll want to watch out for gems. I told you I'd get back to those. A good many pieces of equipment are socketed, and you can insert gems in these sockets to gain special attacks. The first 2 of these abilities are automatically assigned to the right mouse button and the middle mouse button. Left clicking is of course your default attack. You can then have a further 5 abilities automatically assigned to the Q through T keys. Now, gems and sockets come in 3 colors, and you can only insert a gem in a socket of the same color. The colors are related to what attribute is required to use them: red for strength, green for dexterity, and blue for intelligence. In a departure from Diablo, gems can be leveled up in this game, and can also be removed from an item at any time without destroying the item or the gem, though the gem will still be destroyed if you try to sell an item with the gem in it, and you won't get what you would have gotten had you sold the item and the gem separately. Speaking of buying and selling, in a rather interesting twist, there's no gold in the game. Trading is instead done through the use of what are called currency items. These include the Scroll of Wisdom and Portal Scroll. I think we all know what they do. As well as items like the Orb of Transmutation, which can change a normal item into a magic one, or the Armorer's Scrap, which can improve the quality of a piece of armor. If you're short by a particular currency item, just about the only options you'll have are either grind and hope a monster will drop what you need, or trade with another player and hope that they have what you want, because there doesn't appear to be a way to buy currency items in the microtransaction shop. And as far as microtransactions go, there appears to be nothing in the shop that will hinder you from playing the game if you don't have it. Everything appears to be extra or cosmetic. Now let's go ahead and load the game up, and then I'll talk to you about some of my gripes with it. Yeah, it might take a bit. You thirsty? I'm thirsty. So, have a good Christmas?
The Amazing Princess Sarah can walk back and forth.
This guy's good.
Amazing Princess
You should watch
Sarah
some of
can
his
jump.
stuff.
The Amazing Princess Sarah...
Finally. Yeah. When you load the game, you might start to think it froze on you, because it sits on this screen for about 3.5 minutes. No music, no animation, no nothing, before finally starting the game. And it's not like it's loading the whole game, because when you go between areas, you still encounter loading screens. Thankfully, not nearly as long as this one, but still, it kind of makes you wonder just what exactly the game is doing during this time. My only other gripes are minor, but should still be mentioned. First, the overlaid map tends to blend in with the texture of the terrain, and unless you're in a cave or it's dark in the outside world, it's very hard to make it out. And lastly, Scrolls of Wisdom in particular seems to be very scarce, and if you can't get any through grinding or trading with other players, you're pretty much out of luck, because, again, you can't buy them from the endgame shop. And even putting their use as currency aside, their scarcity is an annoyance because, well, just look at how many items one of my characters has stashed that haven't been identified. Sure, I could sell them now if I wanted to, but just like any Diablo clone, they're worth more if they've been identified. Have more Scrolls of Wisdom drop from monsters, or have currency items available in the shop, and I'd say this game is one step closer to perfection. I conclude my review of this game as I began it. If you like Diablo 3, but don't like the idea of paying for a game you can only play with an active internet connection, then I can't think of a better alternative than Path of Exile. It really is just about as close as you can get to playing Diablo for free. Well, thanks for sticking with me for this little experiment of mine. Hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, or if you'd like to leave some thoughts of your own on the game if you've played it yourself. Leave a comment below and maybe click that little like button while you're down there as well. And if you want to try the game for yourself, you can of course check the description below the video for a link to the game. Jikai mane! Sayonara!